This is a nicer book here. Okay, B'Siyata D'Shmayo. This is that we are learning from Kuntreisim Aleph of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And just like we finished learning 3 Mamorim discourses that the Rebbe said when his freedom was announced from prison. So the history of the previous Rebbe is very, 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 very interesting. Very interesting. First of all, because he single-handedly took on himself to fight against communism. And we saw the results as like 70 years later, whatever, that the whole entire communist regime fell down. 50 years later. The communist regime lasted 70 years. So 40 years later, we saw that the whole entire thing fell down. Well, after the previous Rebbe got out of a prison, so they sent him to exile, and then he got out of exile miraculously, and he was freed in Russia, and then afterwards he was still being pursued by his enemies, who were Jews, by the way. And they wanted to very much to have him put back into prison. They were very, very angry that he was released. And finally he got out. He got out. And he moved to Riga. And then his daughter got married to the Rebbe, to the next Rebbe. And shortly thereafter, he traveled to Israel. He was there for 2 weeks, and then he went to America for about a year. And then he came back, and he went back to Riga, and then finally he moved to Warsaw, and he was in Warsaw. This is all in 1929. He moved 1929, he came back in 1930. And in 1939, about the end of 1939, when the Germans attacked Poland, so he was there in the attack of Warsaw. And they conquered Poland. And he was on one of the last ships that left, and he came to America. That's when he came to America, and he was brought there in a wheelchair, and etc. Okay, so this mimer was said when he went to Jerusalem, when he went to Israel. He went to Israel, it was like now, it was right around this time. And he went to Israel, and he was there for 2 weeks. And shortly thereafter, there was the massacres. After he left, he was on the ship, and he heard about it. There were the massacres in Hebron, Tafresh Peitet, 1929, when the Arabs massacred their best friends, Jews they had been friendly with all of. And he heard about that, and he was very ill. There's the stories about what happened. Anyway, when he was in Jerusalem, by the way, why did he go and visit Israel? Why did he visit Israel? Because he wanted to to pray at the graves of his predecessors, the previous Rebbes. And of course, he couldn't go back into Russia. It was impossible to get into Russia, especially him. I guess anyone who wanted to could get into Russia. The problem was getting out. So he decided to go to Israel and pray at the graves of the tzaddikim there. And that's what he did. He went to Israel, and he prayed at the graves of the tzaddikim in Israel for 2 weeks. He went to Hebron, he went to Yerushalayim, he was in Miron, and then he, other places also, Tel Aviv, he was in Afula. What he did in Afula, I don't know, but he was in Afula and Rehovot. And then after that, what? In Afula? Could be, I'll look it up. I just never looked it up. I just always had this question in my mind. Okay. Here we go. Now these are the times of the these are the times when we are remembering the destruction of the temple. Tisha B'Av. Destruction of the first temple and of the second temple. The destruction of the first temple and the second temple was in a way, incomparable tragedy to the Jewish people. In some ways, not to minimize the horror of the Holocaust, but In some ways, it was worse than the Holocaust. In some ways, it was much worse than the Holocaust. First of all, it could be that a greater percentage of the Jewish people were killed. But mainly, the Jewish people were driven from their land. They were driven from their land, and most horrible was they were separated from their identity. The Jewish people were God's people, and they felt that they were God's people. They felt that they had a responsibility to God, every Jew. And they just did not, for whatever it is, did not live up to God's standards, which God set very high. And because of that, he destroyed the first temple, and then after that, destroyed the second temple. Let me just close this window 1 second. Excuse me, there's this wind blowing on me. Give me 1 minute, 1 minute. So when there was the temple, everybody knew it, at least. They knew that they were God's people. And when the temple was destroyed, so that was all confused. That identity became confused. And between the first and the second temples, for instance, just for example, there were a lot of Jews that left Judaism. They figured that God had just left us. That was basically the story of Purim. When Achashverosh made a big meal, and he said that, according to the prophet, said that these 70 years is going to be the destruction of the temple. 70 years. It's only going to be 70 years is going to be the time of exile, and then the Jews are going to come back to Israel. And he made the calculation. According to his calculation, 70 years had passed. He made a mistake in his calculation. But the Jewish people believed it, and they all went to his meal, etc. So it was very, very hard, very difficult, trying times. It was a tremendous fall for the Jewish people. The Holocaust also, but first of all, the Holocaust did not affect all of the Jews. There were a lot of Jews that were living in America and living in other places that were not affected by the Holocaust. And not only that, it wasn't as big of a fall. It wasn't like Jewish identity was destroyed. The problem with the Holocaust was especially that it what you want to call it, destroyed Jewish pride. You had nothing to be proud of to be a Jew anymore. Jews are people that just get killed by the Germans. The Germans were like the lowest and most destructive, disgusting people in the world. They were huge murderers. They really were very expert at murdering people, and the things that they did and the tortures that they made up. The lowest people in the world. The Jews are supposed to be the chosen ones of God. They're supposed to be God. And look what happened. So it was a big blow to Jewish pride, but not so much Jewish identity. Not as much anywhere near as the destruction of the first and the second temples, because the temple was the place where that's where you saw what a Jew really is. That was serving God. The whole purpose of the temple was serving God, doing what God wants. Even though it didn't make any sense, they made sacrifices, animal sacrifices. What's the point? But whatever God says you did, and they did it with happiness. They came with great happiness. You'd feel that God is the creator of the universe. You'd feel God is creating me. You go to the temple, you feel you're being created by God. It's amazing. And you have a tremendous responsibility. Totally not understandable. Everyone would feel this. And when you feel that you're not the boss, that God is controlling everything and that God is with you, so it lets off the pressure a little bit. But on the other hand, it also can make a person more egotistical. If God is creating me, I must be really something special. So I sort of call the shots. Okay. Nevertheless, it's here, coming from here. Yeah, you can close the window if you want.
You'll still pick up my stuff. You're okay.
After the destruction of the temple, the first temple was destroyed, it says, because of 3 sins that the Jews did, idolatry and etc. And that was only 70 years, because the Jews realized they had done these sins. And the second temple, it says, was destroyed because of hatred, jealousy. And that still is almost 2,000 years now. We haven't fixed it up.
I a little peculiar. When we talk about the temples, the first temple, the second temple, we don't also talk about the Mishkan. Because didn't the Mishkan pretty much exist in like about 2 years after Mount Torah, up until the point of the first temple being built? So when the first temple was destroyed, there was actually a direct link destroyed going all the way back to Moshe. And
Okay, of course.
Very, very
Of course.
serious blows.
Yeah. Well, listen, the Mishkans also were destroyed also. Shiloh was destroyed. When the Jews came into the land of Israel, so they built the Mishkan. They took the tabernacle with them. For 14 years, they built it in a place called Gilgal, and then they moved to a place called Shiloh, and there it was for 369 years.
Yeah, and didn't David look at it and say, it's not right, I'm living in a big house?
Right.
And
then King David made the Holy Temple, so it was different. But in the Holy Temple was different.
I mean, it was different, but still.
Yeah, of course there is, of course. It's called a Mikdash. Aseli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. The Mikdash is referring to the tabernacle. So the tabernacle was also called Mikdash. It was also called Mikdash. But still it wasn't the same thing. People could make free will offerings in their backyard. You could still make free will offerings. When the temple was made in Jerusalem, then you couldn't make sacrifices of any sort anywhere else. From then on, it was forbidden to do. Okay, let's go. And nevertheless, we are one of the jobs of the Mashiach. The Rambam says the Mashiach will build the third temple. The Rambam also says that we have to build the third temple. It's a commandment to build the third temple. So the Rebbe explains how this fits together. And it's a glaring contradiction.
Paradox.
That we have to build it. So there's several answers. The Rebbe says we have to build it by means of our work now, and we have to build it by learning the laws. He says if we learn the laws of the temple, and that is doing our part to build it, but the temple is already ready. Another opinion is that, and this is the one Rebbe sort of settles on, that the third temple will come from heaven. That's what it says in the Zohar, another book. The third temple will come from heaven, and that we will bring up the gates. The gates sunk down. Since the gates, they sunk down, we'll raise the gates up. Sa'u sha'arim rosheichem, we'll lift the gates up and put the gates up. However it works out, if God makes it, it can be made in a second, and it can be built at night. If we make it, it can't be built at night. Beis HaMikdash cannot be built at nighttime. You have to build it at daytime, and it can't be built on Shabbos. But if God makes it, He can make it on whenever He wants. He can make it on Shabbos, and it's already ready. What that means, I have no idea. But it's there. Big, huge building of who knows how many hundreds of millions of tons is somehow or other spiritually real more than, I don't know. And nevertheless, the third temple is going to be greater than the first two temples. It's going to be greater than the first two temples. The Rambam says that the Mashiach will build the third temple. He'll draw the Jews together to the land of Israel. First of all, he'll defeat Amalek. He'll defeat our enemies. And then he'll build the temple, and then he'll gather the Jews. Why he'll gather the Jews? Because the only thing that will bring the Jews all back to the land of Israel is by their own volition. All the Jews. What is the only thing which all the Jews have in common, that they all want? All the Jews, without exception, they want to do God's will. Every Jew. It's not revealed. Sometimes it's Jews cover it over, they deny it. Sometimes they're not aware of it. They've never been educated. They don't even know that they're Jews. The Rebbe said, for instance, there could be more Jews in Russia than all the world put together, but they just don't know they're Jews. Their mother didn't know they're Jews. But when they find out that they're Jews, the first thing they're going to want to do is serve the Creator. They won't care about going to heaven. They won't care about burning in hell. They won't care about anything. All they care about is, I want to serve the Creator. In fact, the whole world will be like that. That's what it says. The whole world will be like that. Therefore, all the other religions will be dropped. All the other religions are selfish. What am I going to get? I want to go to heaven. I want to be saved. I. And when Hashem is revealed, everybody's going to reveal, hey, I'm pretty lucky. I'm a creation. I'm being created. I mean, everything I have is amazing. The whole world is a big miracle. And we can serve the Creator. And the only way you can serve the Creator is in the Holy Temple. So the Mashiach is not the cherry on top of the cake or something like that, and we're going to bring the redemption, and we're going to bring the Jews to Israel. It just simply is not going to work. The Jews are not going to want to come. Unless there's something awakened inside of themselves that really desires to serve God. And that's the job of the Mashiach. It says the Mashiach will force everyone in the world, force all the Jews, and eventually the whole world. Bo'ei Olam, it says the Mashiach will force everyone by convincing to awaken inside of themselves this desire for God. If you want to call it, it's called, in English, your conscience. So people wake up. That's what it means. The third temple is going to be greater than the first two temples. The Jews are going to understand what a Jew is. The non-Jews are going to understand what a creation is. Everybody's going to understand what God is and want to understand more. The Rambam says the whole occupation of the world will only to know God better. Gadol yeh kavod habayit hazeh ha'achron min harishon. Greater will be the last temple than the first temple. With me? Are you with me? Greater will be the last temple from the first temple. Pirush Rashi says Rav and Shmuel. Chad Omer, one says bebinyan, Chad Omer b'shanim. One says it will be greater in size, and one says it will be greater in years. Now, a lot of people say that this prophecy is referring to the second temple. The second temple was greater in size than the first temple, and it was greater in years than the first. The first temple lasted 410 years, and the second temple lasted 420 years. And the second temple, especially the one that Herod built, was greater in size than the first temple.
So again, who said this? That the the last temple will be bigger in size and bigger in years.
That's what it says. That's what the Gemara explains the sentence that the prophet says.
And the prophet lived in the time of the first temple.
What?
The prophet lived in the time of the first temple. But yet, you guys share how Shirin talking about how there's going to be a second temple, and yet this was going to be a third temple.
This is a pasuk, by the way, from Chagai. The pasuk says, "Gadol yiyeh kavod habayit hazeh ha'achron min harishon." Pasuk from Chagai. Okay, so what does it mean? The last house will be bigger than the first house. What is this last house? So some people say it's talking about the Holy Temple. Chagai was one of the prophets that was like right in the beginning of Chagai and Malachi and Zechariah. They were part of the Anshe Knesset, the Gedola. They were in the beginning of the second temple. They're in the beginning of the second temple, in the time of Mordechai and...
So he's got to be talking about the third temple.
No, could be talking about the second temple. This was just the beginning of the second temple. Nobody knew this is going to be bigger. Hainu dezeh she'omer gadol, etc. Achron kai al bayacheni. It's talking about the second temple. Ve'in godlus, and what does it mean? It will be bigger. Who could eat the Gemara? It's like it says in the Gemara, Baba Batra Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Sha'amad Yud Shanim Yoter, that it stood 10 years more. Al Bayat. See, the last word on the line is Bayat. Be with us, please. Rishon. The second temple stood 10 years longer than the first temple. Huh? Amnam, but Bezoar Chelak Aleph, in the Zohar, Taf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, Mevoeri explains to Mashkatu that what it says greater will be the last house than the first house. Kai, it refers al is the first word in the line. Binyan la'atid lavo. It's talking about the building that will be in the future. the third temple. Ubezel lo shayach pelugta, and in this there is no argument between Rav and Shmuel, that they argued about will the last house be bigger in years or will it be bigger in size? There's no argument. The third temple, everyone agrees, the Beit HaMikdash L'Atid Lavo, that the third temple will be greater in both. It'll be greater b'shanim, in years. Sheyeh nitzchi, it will be eternal. The third temple will last forever. V'zeu, do you understand what's going on over here? Listen, what happens now? People come to the land of Israel, right? They travel around. People travel around. They come to the land of Israel. What do they see? Same thing as everywhere.
Kotel.
Some people go to the Kotel. Some people go to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right? But in general, what do they see? Like every other country. You see Jews are any different than anybody else? Chosen people, right?
They dress with sugar.
And special, they don't dress. They try to look like everybody else, right? Is there anything special about the land of Israel? When the third temple is built in Israel, first of all, even if there's fake news, false news, they can't hide it for long. Not only that, all the Jewish people will be different. Jewish people will not be confused anymore. There will not be any depression and neuroses and psychoses and what is it called? Anxieties and fears and the crime. Right? We don't have to go too much into what the terrible things that are going into Israel, but we can enough to say that Israel has borrowed all of the bad things that there are in the world and tried to incorporate it into Israeli society. And to a certain degree, unfortunately, they've succeeded. They've succeeded. Why has this happened? Why has this happened? Because they just don't have any identity. There's just emptiness has become the main message of the whole, I want to call it Zionistic idea. A Jew is like everybody else, the Torah is like every other book, the land of Israel, and no such thing as holy. No such thing as holy. The Jews are not a holy people. Piff. The Torah is not a holy book. It's a book. You want to say it's holy? You have a right to say it's holy. But the fact is, right? Well, it's exactly the opposite. The fact is God really does exist. That's the fact. You can believe in him or not. The fact is the Jews are holy. That's the fact. The fact is Jews have responsibility to the world. That's the fact. Okay, Yono, you with me? But they'll only see that and realize it when the temple is built. When the temple is built. Even though Mashiach says Mashiach will bring all the Jews back to Judaism first and then he'll build the temple, but we'll really see it manifested, bring out the good in everybody, the hidden good in everybody, only when there's the holy temple. So it says, therefore, there is no argument. V'zeu gadol yeb, etc. Achron. Hainu. Oto sheyihye, that will be, see, first word on the line is sheyihye. It's 6 lines down, 8 lines down. La'atid lavo. V'gadula sheyilo, and its greatness will be bi ha beis davorim, in both things. Binyan v'shanim, in the building will be greater, and the years, time it will be longer. The Bayit Rishon, the first temple, V'sheni in the second temple. Hang on, let's take a short break.